Diana was a young girl who always wanted to become a princess. However, when her desires came true, her dream would turn into a nightmare and a fight for her life. This is the cold and sinister case of Princess Diana. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be in the world right now. Hello, I'm Lloyd, and today you're watching When Evil Follows.
What if this woman's name had been Diana Smith, and she'd written in a note which had been subsequently unveiled, "My husband Charles Smith wants me to die in a car accident," and subsequently she did. In any other family or in any other country, surely Charles Smith would have been called to the witness stand at the inquest into his wife's death.
In 1997, the death of a princess and her lover would rock the world, leaving the general public with many unanswered questions, forcing the British establishment 10 years later into opening the longest and most extensive sensational inquest in British legal history. This inquest would prevail at the Royal Crown Court in London. However, even after the royal investigation that was completely covered and aired by the main royal media frenzy, millions of ordinary people around the world are still convinced that the death of Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed were no accident.
I think it's murder.
Murder.
It was murder.
For me, I think it was a murder. Murder.
In my opinion, there can be no doubt that she was actually murdered.
When the woman left a note saying, FYI, if I'm dead, here's how it's gonna happen, and then it happens exactly like that, I think someone should pay attention.
I mean, I just know our initial reaction was, well, they finally killed her. Because we're used to it.
I think it was murder.
If you go to a bar, you'll find three people who go, ooh, but the royals did it, didn't they?
Oh, of course Diana was bumped off. She knew she was going to be bumped off.
Now, if you're not sure if Diana's death was an accident or murder, covered up by the British establishment, an elaborate exercise in burying the truth rather than uncovering it, the facts I'm going to expose will give you an insight into the dark truth and sinister world of the so-called British monarchy. Over the years, it's true to say, the royal family like to present themselves as part of a benign and freedom-loving tradition. Just take a look at the film The King's Speech, supposedly based on the truth. And as you will have gathered by now, this episode is the antidote to The King's Speech, because I'm going to re-pull down that red curtain once and for all. Not with opinions and not with conspiracies, but with hard, solid facts. Undeniable facts. Call it a step-by-step full Monty, stripping away the layers, leaving only the bare-naked truth. Officially, the royal family cost British taxpayers around £45 million per year. That includes for the Royal Palace, Windsor Castle, and even Balmoral is all paid for by the taxpayers' purse. Their wealth includes the royal artwork collection, which is worth billions and billions of pounds. That belongs to the British people, but yet people are not allowed to see it. In return, the royal family refuses to obey many British laws, like the 1968 Race Relations Act. And you can see very clearly in this footage that there is no non-whites in the royal household. Even more upsetting, the ritual ceremony that you are watching is called Trooping Colour, and yet there's not a non-white face to be seen. And in the past, the royal family have been notorious for their royal racism. These phrases have all been used in public, and so God only knows what they would say in a private setting behind closed doors. The racism is nothing new. There was a close relationship between the Nancys and the royals during the late 1930s. Many of these details, even today, remain a closely guarded secret and something mainstream media doesn't seem to want to talk about. Not to mention Prince Philip, known for having many internal and external sexual affairs with other women. And yet the newspapers and TV media never seem to want to publish these stories to the mainstream public, but will routinely expose the affairs of football players and pop stars and other celebrities, but not Prince Philip. Mainly because in Britain, the media dare not challenge authority of those at the very top, and They would be right. The royal family still retain a ruthless grip of power and control in 21st century England due to a corrosive and corruptive system, keeping tens of thousands of public and famous officials in permanent obedience to the monarchy, all hoping for a knighthood or an OBE in return for a lifetime of royal service. And yet, these are the people that operate Britain's system of government, from judges to coroners, police chiefs, parliament, official private secretaries, members of the Secret Service, and privy councillors.
When I became a cabinet minister, I was made a privy councillor. You swear that you will protect the Queen from all foreign prelates, potentates and powers, and you will report on colleagues if they're disloyal and so on. And they read it to me, and I said at the end, I didn't agree. And they said, you don't have to agree. So I said, what do you mean? They said, we've administered the oath. Now that phrase, the administration of oaths, which people would have heard, means you're injected with the oath. I've been injected with an oath.
The royals don't only use honours and oaths of allegiance to preserve their power. They use intimidation too, as Diana found to her cost. They demand absolute secrecy and loyalty from their subjects, and they stifle dissent.
And so now, with all that being said and out the way, ask yourself just one thing. Would the British establishment allow Muslim blood to enter into the royal lineage? And how far would they go to stop that from happening?
And given Prince Philip's Nazi background, is it really so unthinkable that those at the top of the present-day British establishment might go to any lengths to rid themselves of a turbulent princess?
Well, anything good I ever did, nobody ever said a thing, never said well done or was it okay. But if I tripped up, which invariably I did, because I was new at the game, a ton of bricks came down on me.
However, the facts are that this would mean the Game of Thrones theory would become true. An immediate threat to the royal establishment, effectively splitting the monarchy up once and for all. And so it's not exactly a stone throw away from believing that Diana's death couldn't have come at a more better time for the royal family, especially after Diana was reported to have been pregnant and in a much loved relationship with Dodi Fayed. Born on the 1st day of July in the year of 1961 and raised on the royal grounds of the Sandringham estate, Diana from a young age always dreamed of one day becoming a princess. However, when her desires came true, her dreams would turn into a nightmare.
The royal family, it really is true, are much more, at least in that generation, are much more interested in animals than they are in human beings.
The royals are not a sentimental bunch and treat their wives like farmers treat cattle. They're not big on romance. They're very big on breeding.
And I suppose in love. Of course. Whatever in love means.
Whatever love means. Perhaps this was Diana's first public indication that this was going to be a loveless marriage. And by seeing her facial expressions, I believe the intensity and the strain was always apparent. And after giving birth to Prince William and Harry, by now it was no secret that the romance was pretty much off the menu, eventually leading to Charles spending more time with Camilla and Diana finding friends and company elsewhere.
A divorce is in the works for the Prince and Princess of Wales.
The divorce was clearly very painful for all involved and was very messy.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Diana took many interests in disarming minefields and raising plenty of money for many different charities around the world, whilst going against the royal establishment.
Simone Simmons was with Diana in February 1997, when a government defence minister made a threatening phone call warning the princess to end her involvement with the campaign, otherwise accidents could happen.
The phone went in her little lounge and she picked it up and then called me over. And there was a voice that was in the middle of a conversation saying, don't meddle in things you know nothing about. Accidents can happen. She went a bit pale. She took it as a threat. And she said that was Nicholas Soames. I don't know his voice, but it was very, very plummy.
And with her romance to a Muslim lover, Dodi Fayed, becoming more and more public, the royals began to see Diana as a loose cannon and a threat. Just the thought of the future king of England having a Muslim half-brother made Diana a target, and she knew it. Now, just months before Diana died, a close confidant of hers overheard Prince Philip in Buckingham Palace planning to arrange to get rid of Diana once and for all by staging her death by means of a car accident. And so Diana wrote an urgent letter to her butler, Paul Barrel, stating that the royal family were planning on making attempts of taking her life. She also said the same thing to her lawyer, Lord Miskin, who made private notes of her prediction. However, just 3 weeks after her death, and realising that the letter would have disastrous consequences for the royal family, he handed the letter to the Royal Chief of Police, P.C. Condon, who also realised its significance, and so he concealed it for almost 10 years. And it would be at Diana's royal inquest almost 10 years later, P.C. Condon would finally hand in the letters into the Royal Crown Court judge, who obviously was working under the Queen's hand. Being in a royal court, that police officer was never charged or punished for deliberately withholding serious and important evidence. Withholding criminal information is a serious offence, but no, he wasn't punished in any sense. And what's even more disturbing about this fact is, just 1 year later after Diana's royal inquest, P.C. Condon was knighted by the Queen, and he now sits here, in the House of Lords. Strange that. The crash occurred at 12:23 a.m. on August the 31st in the year of 1997 inside the Lamar Tunnel in Paris. Her partner Dido fired and the driver were instantly killed, and both were pronounced dead at the scene. However, Diana was still alive, but she would sadly pass away just 2.5 hours later. Now you might be thinking all of this sounds like a very unlucky situation. And that's true. But what else is true is that Diana was still very much alive. Yeah, she was injured, but she was also very much aware of her situation. And had she received prompt hospital treatment, she could well have survived. But she didn't. Instead, an ambulance containing Dr. Marco Martino arrived at the scene. And even though other ambulances were also present, Dr. Martino took sole charge over the princess and made a series of bizarre and disturbing decisions that would seal her fate. It took an astonishing 37 minutes after the car crash for Dr. Martino to remove the still conscious Diana from the Mercedes and put her in the ambulance, which is really odd, because the back of the car was undamaged. It then took an extraordinary 81 minutes after the car crash before the ambulance actually set off towards the hospital. Oddly, no radio contact was made with Ambulance HQ throughout the entire journey, and it took an inexplicable 1 hour and 43 minutes after the car crash before the ambulance arrived at the nearby hospital. Having travelled there at a snail's pace on empty roads, by now Diana's life was fading away. What's more eerily strange about this whole situation is, during Diana's inquest 10 years after her death, the royal court couldn't find any existing evidence of this Dr. Martino, and they couldn't find any of his history reports or employment records, or any information about the ambulance crew members to give statements as to why the journey took so long in getting the princess to the hospital. So who was this Dr. Martino and ambulance crew that was solely in charge of Princess Diana's life on that evening? Well, apparently, nobody knows. Just another strange so-called factor that plays a part in this so-called unfortunate accident. And another strange factor, just before the car crash happened, the cameras were all suddenly turned off, outside and inside the tunnel. Who turned them off? Why were they even turned off? Surely those cameras could have identified exactly what happened and would have provided critical information, unless somebody didn't want that information to be accessible. It's just very strange. Oh, and just 1 hour later, after Princess Diana was carried away in an exceptionally slow-moving ambulance that was full of unknown fake hospital staff, the French authorities entered the tunnel and then they washed away all the blood and evidence. Now, they knew it was a high-risk celebrity profile case and a potential crime scene, but they still washed away all the possible evidence. Why? We also know eyewitnesses reported a white Fiat Uno driving at high speed pulling out in front of Princess Diana's Mercedes, only to then flash a huge bright white light at the car, blinding the driver. Both cars then came together with enough force, causing Diana's car to veer off to the left before crashing at high speed into a concrete post within the tunnel. And then just seconds later, the white Fiat Turbo was seen speeding away from the crash scene. Now we know this as fact, as eyewitnesses gave statements that were made public. public. And white paint from the Fiat Uno was also found on the side of Princess Diana's Mercedes. Which begs the question, who was driving that white Fiat Uno? Well, not long after the crash happened, a white Fiat Uno was found burnt out with the owner's dead body inside. The body belonged to that of James Anderson. Okay, so who's James Anderson? Well, James Anderson was a millionaire paparazzi at the top of his game with seriously strong connections to the British Secret Service. Now, he'd been following Princess Diana weeks before her crash. He was actually taking photographs of her in the Mediterranean. In fact, he was responsible for taking the photographs of her belly in swimwear, promoting the possibility that Princess Diana could actually be pregnant. So yeah, the French police claim that the driver, James Anderson, had committed suicide. That's what they claimed as the truth. Which is kind of funny because the British people were not informed of that fact. Even more bizarre still, the firemen who actually found James's body inside the car said that they saw 2 clear bullet holes in the man's skull. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out it's going to be difficult for a man to shoot himself twice in the head and then set the car on fire before dying. Which leads me to believe that this was a professional hit job on what some would class as a loose end. And it's not hard to believe that should James Anderson ever spill the beans on his part to do with Diana's death, this would not only expose the dark side of the British establishment and the royal crown, but would also no doubt spark off huge upset and riots within the public domain, and most likely would bring an end to the royal monarchy once and for all. After all, you know the saying, loose lips sink ships. Another worrying factor in this case was Diana was stripped of all royalty status in life, and yet in death, mysteriously her corpse became royal property. Within hours, royal representatives gave the order for her body to be partially inbound, a process making it conveniently impossible for anyone to tell if she was pregnant or not. Along with this strange royal body snatching occurrence, Diana's bloods also went missing, no doubt to hide or prevent further truths from reaching the loyal public. That, along with the fact that the driver of Diana's car was apparently 3 times over the driving limit. When at the Hotel Ritz Plasma, direct bank statement shows that the driver was only drinking sparkling water with light tonic. And yet for a solid 20 minutes before getting into the vehicle, the driver was seen on CCTV, acting fine and normal and perfectly sober. Yet another unconvincing truth to hide the truth behind. So what was the end verdict at Diana's 10-year royal public inquest? Well, after the judge heard so many eerily and strange, unaccountable facts, all pointing towards Princess Diana's death, the verdict was actually pronounced as unlawful killing. Yeah, it's true. The court actually ruled Diana's death as legally an unlawful killing, which means she was murdered. However, here's the twisted catch.
The jury blamed the following vehicles, not the paparazzi.
What is also interesting, overlooked, I think, almost totally by the media and commentators, was the wording of the verdict. Well, the detail of this verdict was such that it was an unlawful killing contributed to by, and one of the factors was, following vehicles, not the paparazzi.
Initially, journalists were confused, but within minutes, the BBC was reporting that the jury had blamed the paparazzi, and the rest of the media followed the example of the British establishment's impartial broadcaster. Soon, the verdict had been spun by the media into an accident caused by the paparazzi. And so, a lie got halfway around the world while the truth was still putting its boots on. The altered verdict was still on the BBC's news website at the time of making this documentary.
The press covering the court inquest into the late Diana back then, they were all royalist reporters. And that's not even to mention ruining their chance of one day being honoured with a royal OBE. And so the royal press dubbed Diana's death as accidental. But the verdict was definitely unlawful killing, meaning Princess Diana was murdered. In fact, Lily Allen, the singer, her father made a full documentary on everything I've mentioned. And guys, you should definitely check that documentary out. I'll leave a link below in the comment section. And with that being said, you only need to look at Diana's children, now fully grown and both walking in her footsteps, being happy and achieving amazing things for charities around the world, whilst at the same time completely distancing themselves from the royal establishment. And is there any wonder why? I mean, come on. The late Princess Diana was an amazing and beautiful woman who was loved by so many people all around the world. And though she will always be remembered as the Queen of Hearts, I truly believe that both of her sons will one day become a much loved ruler and, just like their mother, cracking the medieval racist code and will rule with unconditional love for years to come. Hello there, and thank you for watching yet another episode of When Evil Follows. If you have enjoyed this case, then please do remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. You know, it's sometimes quite difficult to hear the hidden truths, but at the same time, knowledge is power, and that's a good thing. And if you've enjoyed this episode and you're new around here, we upload solved and unsolved, shocking, dark cases, including supernatural events, all based on evidence and hard facts, every single week, right here on this channel. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. And guys, don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss out on any of our amazing up-and-coming videos, just like this one. So what did you think to today's video? Was there any information that you was completely unaware of? And now you know that Princess Diana was legally registered as murdered. So who do you believe the killer was? Who do you think could have killed her? And why? Answer the 3 questions in the comment section below, as I really enjoy reading your comments and I will respond to each and every one of your comments personally. I'm so curious as to what you're all thinking, and if you're still hungry for another slice of horror crimes from the dark, here's 2 more videos that are guaranteed to make the hairs on your arms stand up like the real Slim Shady. So go ahead and check them out. And as always, please stay safe, look after yourself, and I'll see you again the next time when evil follows. Bye.